Hello, dear viewer. I hope you've already subscribed by clicking the bell so you don't miss new parts or new stories. Enjoy the story and, of course, have fun watching it. Dig 2 Graves. Chapter 4.1. I start to get up and walk towards her, but Janine's presence reminds me to be careful. Heidi, I have to ask you a question that I already know the answer to. I knew the answer before I even got here, but I have to ask it anyway. Did you sign this affidavit? No, she says very emphatically. I signed your performance review. You didn't sign this document? I repeat. No. But the second page, does it look familiar? Is it the page you signed? But the first page is different? No, I mean yes. The second page is the same. The first page is a lie. A page of disgusting lies. I would never do anything like that. We would never do anything like that, and you would never do that to Susie. Heidi, could you please sign a legal affidavit stating that you did not sign this document as it is currently drafted? Definitely, she says, and anger creeps into her voice. What's this all about, Jake? Are you in trouble, Jake? Am I in trouble? Is Miss Hinckley behind all of this? What does this mean for my brother? Oh my God, what does it all mean? It's going to be okay, Heidi, I reassure her. Don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong or get in trouble. The important thing is that you stay here in Houston and take care of your family and your brother, okay? Don't worry about anything else. I'll take care of it, okay? Just keep me posted on what's going on in your life. Heidi snorts and nods. But what about you, Jake? This is about sexual harassment. About that you coerced me. I smile to allay her fears. You don't have to worry about me, Heidi. Those who know me well know the truth. And your signature on the affidavit will save you any other problems for a long time to come. And Susie? Does she know about this? She asks. I'm just nodding. My God, how does she feel? It must be terrible. She doesn't think you and I did anything? Susie's a little uncomfortable with all this right now, but you don't worry. I know she thinks as warmly of you as she did before. All this came to light. So don't worry about a thing. Of course, she can't seriously think you and I did anything, can she? It's just one page, and that one is obviously so fake. The problem is that you are so honest. Your signature on that first document, even if it was forged, carries a lot of weight. Plus I stop myself. Heidi looks at me. Got what, Jake? I sigh. There are pictures in there. Pictures? How can there be pictures? We were never together. I shrug. Do you have them? I look at Janine, trying to ignore her spread legs. She smiles and shrugs. They really upset Heidi, I don't think. Suddenly standing up. I don't care at all what you think, Jake Vickers. I have a right to see these pictures. I sigh, reaching into my briefcase and pulling out another folder. You'd better sit down, Heidi. Heidi sits down slowly, not taking her eyes off the folder. When she is fully seated, I hold the folder out to her. She takes one last look at me and opens the folder. Oh my God, she muttered, and I saw her turn crimson. She studied each picture, each time saying, oh my God, and getting more and more crimson as she examined each of the 8 pictures. Finished, she tucks all the 8 by 10-inch glossy sheets back into the folder and hands the folder back to me. I realize how people can be fooled by these pictures, Heidi finally says. She looks up at me. But that's not us. That's not me. I don't have a tattoo. A tattoo? I exclaim. I open the folder and start looking through the photos. Look at the last picture, Heidi says quietly. I'm going to the last picture. I look over every inch of it, but I don't see anything. I'm about to ask Heidi where she saw the tattoo when I suddenly notice it. It's right in the middle of her back, on her ass. In the last picture, she's sitting up straight, stretched out on my lap. The sheet that partially covered her has slipped down and bunched up around her waist. But above the sheet, you can barely see the outline of some kind of tattoo. Wow, I muttered to myself. This could be important. Would you mind if we included a statement in the affidavit that you don't have a tattoo? Heidi nods her head. Janine quickly creates the affidavit using a program on her laptop and prints it out on a small but equally efficient portable printer. Being a notary public, she can also notarize the document. It seems incredible, But in just a few hours, we were able to identify a lot of suspicious activity and cast doubt on the idea that Heidi and I were in that bed. I get up to leave. I walk over to Heidi and hug her. Heidi hugs me back. "I'm sorry, Jake," she says. "I'm sorry too, Heidi," I reply. I hug her one last time, and then Janine and I walk Heidi to the door. I wish her well and remind her to call me if she has any difficulties. After thinking about it, I tell her that I expect at least a couple calls a week, regardless of how things are going. She nods, sniffing, and Janine and I close the door behind us. Janine and I are silent all the way to the car. We fasten our seatbelts and get out of Heidi's car. Janine immediately reclines the seat back a few inches, skirt pulled up, knees spread. I can't help but look up to see her smiling at me. "My compliments to your hairdresser." I finally manage to squeak out. "You like it?" She laughs. I watch as her hand moves lower. I see her move her finger for a few moments, then pull it out and expose it to the sunlight. The finger glistens. I can't keep from moaning, and she laughs again. I know what I'll be thinking about tonight in my hotel room. "So," she cooed, "do you think you'd like to try your hand at this?" "My hand?" I asked a little excitedly. "Yes, you said you like the way my hairdresser does it. Do you think you would like to try your hand at being my hairdresser?" I close my eyes for a moment to calm myself. If your divorce goes through, you won't be as interesting anymore, she laughs, sitting down and putting her knees together. "And that we understand each other," she continues. "In the office, they call me the Ice Queen. No one will believe a word you say if you decide to say something." Suddenly, I find myself completely disengaged from the blonde black widow. I smile just for effect. "What do you believe?" I innocently reply. "But I want to ask you a question." I continue to stare at her. She tilts her head in my direction, but doesn't say anything else. "What's the flash for? If you're the Ice Queen, why the charade? And perhaps most importantly, why me?" She laughs. "Maybe because I like to tease. Maybe because I can." I shake my head. "That's not really an answer, but more of an evasion. Because you can? Do you get away with it all the time? I'd really like to know. Why the teasing and why me specifically?" "Yeah," she replies with a smirk and doesn't say anything else. We drive back to the airport in silence until Jeanine speaks up. "I was curious." "Curious?" repeated I. "In cases like yours, there are usually grounds for prosecution. Your wife certainly wouldn't have gotten a divorce based on the paltry evidence we've seen so far. There must be something else in your past. From what I've seen, men can be divided into two categories. They're either cheaters or weaklings. So I was wondering if you were a cheater, so I checked you out. A cheater would have left me a long time ago." I look at her. "Really? I knew we were supposed to be a simple gender, but I never thought we were that simple." I wait for a response, which doesn't come. I look at her again. "So, since I haven't made a move on you, you don't think I'm a cheater?" She looks at me and smiles slyly. "I haven't fully decided yet." I shake my head as I drive through the streets adjacent to the airport terminals. She more or less just called me a wuss. A week ago, I would have laughed at that. Now I'm just furious. Why would she be so vindictive after what happened last Friday? Then I realized that she didn't know about last Friday, that Bill had said that the details of that night would not be released to his staff unless necessary. So is Janine really just a young black widow? A tease? Is she really still baiting me? Suddenly I decided that I just didn't care. For all her physical beauty and seductive appeal, I sensed a lot of hidden emotional baggage in her that I didn't have the energy or time to clear up. Pulling up to the departure terminal, I pulled up to the curb and put the car in park. "Why don't you go ahead and check in and I'll return the car and catch up with you later?" She looks at me in confusion. "I could go with you to the rental?" "We both don't need to haggle for a car or shuttle bus. Besides, you have a big bag with all your gear. You go ahead and I'll catch up with you." She stares at me for a moment and shrugs. I think she's just realized that all of our games have come to their logical conclusion. She makes a motion to open the car door, then stops and turns to me again. Smiling, she slides her hand down the inside of my thigh. "You don't trust me, Jake?" I turn around and look her straight in the eye. Unperturbed, and without a shadow of sarcasm, I feel with my life. She laughs and takes her hand away. She opens the car door and gets out, looking out the window. Jake, you still have a lot to learn. That wouldn't be your life. It would be your balls. I watch her walk into the terminal. Not likely, I think to myself. And I'm glad there are things I have yet to learn. Not that I want to learn them, especially from you. Tuesday, 9:48 p.m. Janine and I returned to Dallas-Fort Worth and immediately split up. I'm thankful the flight from Houston was short, as barely a dozen words were spoken between us. I guess she didn't like the way I blew her off in the terminal. I have a feeling few men have ever done that to her. I pick up my car from the short-term parking lot and head to Bud's, where Bill and I will meet with him to discuss the latest discoveries and strategize. I pull up to Bud's office and notice that Bill's car is already parked. I walk in and am surprised to see that Tracy is still there. Have you been here all day? No, I left this afternoon because I knew I'd have to open again today. Bud isn't here yet, but he called about 10 minutes ago and said he just pulled off the highway and would be here soon. And here's your lawyer already here, with a nod toward the conference room. I start to turn toward the conference room when suddenly the office door swings open abruptly and Bud walks in with a big grin. Thanks, Tracy, he says to her first. Why don't you go home and tell your husband that I'll make it up to him for making you come here so late? Tracy smiles and picks up her purse to leave. The poor girl kept the place open for us, waiting for her boss to return. I promised to make it up to her. She says, You sure will. Bud asks her if my lawyer is there, and when she nods, asks her to wait a minute and let him settle the two of us in his office. She tells him that she's already sent my lawyer to the conference room. He nods in acknowledgement. Bud and I enter the conference room, and I introduce Bud to Bill. He asks us to make ourselves comfortable, while he goes over the results of the other parts of the investigation. Through the half-open door, we hear him talking to Tracy for a few minutes, and then he tells her thanks for staying and asks her to drive home in peace. He disappears for a few minutes and finally bursts into the conference room. Sorry to keep you both waiting, Bud says, walking around our chairs and moving to the other end of the table. I wanted to get the latest reports from Tracy and my staff, he explains, settling into his chair. Bud takes one look at my face and grins. I'm sorry, he says. I know it's not funny, but you look like you're about to burst. So let's get started, shall we? What do you say? I'm all for it, I almost exploded. Bud laughs again. Okay, first of all, let's look at the original affidavit they say your secretary signed. He pulls out the original affidavit and places it on the table. First off, Jake, do you know anything about printers and the Secret Service? Secret Service? I ask. Yes, the U.S. Secret Service is part of the Treasury Department. Everyone knows they are directly responsible for protecting the president, but their job was originally to protect the country's money supply. When counterfeiting occurs, it is the Secret Service that gets involved. What does the Secret Service have to do with Susie and me? I ask, a little alarmed. Nothing, except that they've done us a great favor. What do you mean? With the advent of computers, especially printers, copiers, etc., it has become much easier to print something that looks like a $20 bill. Of course, for a quality counterfeit bill, you have to use the proper paper and watermarks. That's another story. But at first glance, it is possible to print something very similar to an authentic bill. The Secret Service has talked most, if not all, printer manufacturers into printing a virtually invisible mark on each sheet. Virtually every color printer sold in this country prints an invisible unique identification code on each sheet of paper. The mark is only revealed when the appropriate ultraviolet light is used. Even if you guessed how to see it, it would mean nothing to you because it is a code. I'm starting to get worried. Are you saying we can tell what printer these pages were printed on? That's not all, son, he continues. Since printers are connected to computers, and computers have a concept of time, this invisible mark contains not only a unique printer code, but also a date and timestamp. If you discover this mark and learn how to decipher it, you can determine not only which printer printed a piece of paper, but also on what day and at what time. It's actually very easy to see the mark. You just need the right light source. The hardest part is figuring out how to decipher the tag. Unfortunately, every printer manufacturer has developed their own code. But fortunately for us, I know someone who has those codes and I showed him your affidavit. What did he find out? asks Bill before I can answer. Both sheets were printed on the same printer. Oh, I say, hoping to hear otherwise. But they were printed at different times, he adds with a smile. At different times? Repeated I. Yes, both sheets were printed on January 17th. The second sheet was printed first at 7:03 a.m. The first sheet was printed 15 hours later at 10:13 p.m. How can that be? Stunned, I ask. That day, according to Heidi, she signed the affidavit, but she also said she flew to Houston late that night. She was in the air at the time the first page was printed. She could not have signed that page. That's right, Jake. But then, how did her initials end up on it? Obviously, Heidi didn't put them there. Truth be told, from a forensic point of view, it wasn't a very successful attempt to create a forged document. The second page was printed on a laser printer using toner. Heidi's initials look real and are written in black ink. It may even be possible to figure out what kind of pen was used based on analyzing the ink, but that's overkill. The main thing is that Heidi's initials on the first page are in printer toner. Oh my God, I muttered, realizing that this completely refuted the original statement. Okay, I realize it's toner versus ink, but I'm curious. If the set of initials on the first page were created by the printer, were they an exact copy of the second page? You're on the right track, boy. You're smart, despite what your father grumbles about you. He grinned. We checked it out, and the two initials aren't exactly the same. We have no proof of exactly how it was done, but I think it's safe to assume that Heidi's signature was scanned from the original first page, then digitally altered, then transferred to the fake first page. That first page was then printed out. I guess I'd feel better if the two sets of initials matched. But at least we finally have hard evidence that this whole thing is a setup, I muttered. There's another thing, Jake, Bud adds. I get to do a lot of things because I know a lot of people. I exchange favors all the time. Bill laughs. And who did you exchange pleasantries with, Bud? Bud looks at Bill with a smirk. I'd never tell you exactly who, but I do know that Jake's firm leases the 14th and 15th floors in a building in downtown Dallas. And I also know that security for the entire building is outsourced and that a pass is required to access all the offices. Don't tell me. I smile. Yes, a friend of a friend of a friend accidentally printed out the access log by badge for 2 floors rented by your firm on January 17th between midnight and midnight on January 18th. And? I ask, not wanting to stay in suspense. See for yourself, he grinned, taking the printout and tossing it on the table. Looking at Bill over my shoulder with equal interest, I quickly reviewed the report. What interested me most was the access during the first part of the day. Several passes were going in and out throughout the early morning hours. I figured they were either maintenance or security personnel, but 2 entries caught my interest. At 6:23 a.m., 2 passes were used on floor 15, off a few seconds apart. I raised my eyes to Bud, a look of disappointment on my face. Okay, we have 2 interesting pass numbers, but who are they? Tsk, tisk, tisk, tisk. A little faith in Jake. He takes a second printout from the same folder and tosses it on the table between Bill and me. I laugh. You like to drag this out too much. Bill takes a second printout, which apparently lists all the pass numbers for everyone in the building. Looking over each other's shoulders, we scan Bill's list looking for the 2 numbers that met at 6:23 on my list. Got it, he says. Evelyn Hinckley. Damn her, muttered I. I hand the second issue to Bill and watch him flip through a few pages. Timothy Schmidt, he pitches. I slowly lean back in my chair. I'm going to kill that bastard. I look up and see Bud staring at me intently. He shifts his gaze to Bill. Jake, I can tell what you're thinking, and I think your lawyer can too. I can tell you from personal experience that it's not worth going to jail over a woman. He looked at Bill again and continued. Someday, I'll share a personal story with you, so don't go ruminating about it and hatching plans. You still have a hard road ahead of you, and you don't need criminal charges added to what you already have. I consider what Bud said, and nod, sitting back down. But in the back of my mind, I think, he's right. But, Jake, we have more evidence, so let's not get hung up on one fragment. We punched some big holes in those words in the affidavit, but the pictures say 1,000 words, right? So let's take a closer look at these pictures. I asked someone I trust to review the negatives. One thing I can say with absolute certainty is that these photos have not been doctored. The person who took these photos used regular ASA film, not a digital camera. A digital photograph can always be declared a forgery, whether it is or not. But it's much harder to clean dust off a negative. I don't know if it was done on purpose, but they've created a largely uncorroborated set of evidence. Sorry, Jake, but the photos are real, and I have to believe it's you starring. This chapter has come to an end, and if you want to read this chapter uncensored, then be sure to check out our Telegram channel. The link is in the description. To be continued.